Okay, another thing we need to do to make this run more reliably, we're going to make a change to the basic ladder logic, and I think what I'm going to do is set the windows up so we can see the ladder logic on the left side at the same time as the simulation. So there's a basic problem with this, which is that you notice that the not forward bit is true here, and so it could potentially make one of these outputs, the retract outputs, go true. So what we're going to do is, instead of using forward here and not forward here, we're going to use an actual separate bit called reverse, and it's only going to be true during this reverse cycle. So let's turn off dynamic display. And what I'm going to do, first I have to stop this and unconnect. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to my symbol table and add a bit called reverse, REV. And it's going to be U101. And what I'm going to do then is replace this forward with a regular input, non-inverted, and I'm going to label that reverse. Okay, and now what I have to do is I want to make sure that reverse bit gets set right here. As soon as the C sensor hits the extend sensor C1, I'm going to reset C extend, set C retract, reset the forward bit, and set the reverse bit. So I need to move this section of the ladder logic down and put in a set. I guess I'll just copy this. And then this is going to be the reverse bit here. Alright, so at that point the reverse bit will be set to be a true, and that should make the reverse sequence go. Now the only thing is, at the very end of the ladder logic, I want to reset that. So I will just copy this, change that to a reset, and label it with reverse. So that should then reset reset the reverse bit back to 0 when it's all done. So I'm just going to fill this in with a rung. Alright, so that should clean up the logic a little bit. And again, because we made a change, I'm going to make sure everything runs. So I'm going to go Program, Compile, Program Connect, hit the play button, dynamic display, hit start. Oops, I forgot to turn on power and compressed air again. All right, and then we got A, B, C, C, B, and A. Okay, so at this point, you're ready to do some of the troubleshooting exercises, and I'm going to demonstrate a couple of them. So you're going to start with the outputs, and basically what you need to do is turn off the dynamic display, and we're going to start with the B plus output. In my case, my B plus solenoid is connected to output 2. So what we're going to do is disconnect it, just delete the line that's connecting it, and then we'll restart the dynamic display. And what we just want to do is observe how far, what effect that has, that disconnected output has on the process. So if I hit the start button, oh, I forgot. I need to click the power switch and the compressed air. Okay, now, so start, A extends, and it just stays there. And that's kind of what we would expect, because the next thing that's supposed to happen is B is supposed to extend, but there's no connection. So the output of the PLC is on, but it's just sitting there. So that's what you're going to do, is just delete an output, delete a connection, see how far the process goes, and then you're going to stop the dynamic display, reconnect it. Now this is where, when you restart the dynamic display, because we had that process kind of halfway done, you need to hit this reset button. That's why we put the reset button in there, so that we can clear the outputs, because otherwise you start it up and it'll be halfway in between the process. So do that first, then we want to turn the power switch to the outputs on and the compressed air, and just make sure that everything works. Okay, that looks good. Alright, so we're going to try, the next one we're going to do is the B minus solenoid, which is the next output right here. Same thing, I'm going to disconnect that by deleting that line, and then turn the dynamic display back on. And let's see where this one stops. So if we hit the, oh, I forgot again. So you got to close the power to the outputs and turn on compressed air. Okay, now there goes A, B extends, C extends, C retracts, and that's where the process stops, which again is where we would expect it. It's the point at which the retract solenoid should be doing its thing. All right, so a couple more things to do in the lab, but it's all going to be similar to that on the outputs. So let's do the same thing. We're going to stop the dynamic display, reconnect the output, restart dynamic display. Now in this case, none of the outputs are on, so we don't need to reset anything. So we'll just turn on connect the common to the outputs and the compressed air, and just make sure everything works the way it's supposed to. A, B, C, C, B, A. Okay, now let's move over to the sensor side, and I'm going to try the sensor B1. So I'm going to just do the same thing, disconnect the B1 sensor from its input, turn on dynamic display, and turn on, press this, oh, I forgot again. You always have to connect 24 volts and turn on the compressed air. Okay, then the start button causes A and then B, and that's where it stops. So sensor B1 is true, but it's not connected to the PLC. So the next step in the ladder program is to have C extend, but it won't do that until it sees a true on input 4. All right, so let's stop the dynamic display and reconnect, start it back up again, and we need to hit the reset button to clear the outputs, and then just make sure, oops, I keep forgetting, turn on power, turn on compressed air, and let's make sure the process works. that looks good. Okay, so now we're going to see what happens when the B0 sensor is disconnected, see what effect that has on the process. And I think I'm going to go back to side-by-side view so we can see the ladder logic at the same time. And so I'll go ahead and disconnect B0, turn on dynamic display, and turn on the power to the outputs and the compressed air, and hit the start switch. So we see A extends, B extends, C extends, C retracts, B retracts, and that's where it gets stuck. So notice that sensor doesn't have any effect until it's in this reverse part of the cycle, and nothing happens until B is actually retracted. Now it's telling that the ladder logic is telling, should be telling A to retract, but it's not getting the signal from B0 sensor. Alright, so stop the dynamic display, reconnect, turn the dynamic display back on, and now we're going to have to reset because it was stuck halfway through the process. And then, whoops, I always forget this, power and compressed air, and make sure it works properly before we move on. So that's what the lab is going to be about. You're going to be introducing different faults with the outputs, with the inputs, and then later on with the pneumatic lines, and just seeing what effect it has on the process. So good luck with the lab, and we will see you when you are here in person.